Uh, that introduction was rather formal and very structured, but I'm also a nice guy. Okay, let's start. Welcome back again. A very good morning to all of you all. Students eager to learn, young women and men who will define the future of the world, civil society actors and artists, public sector officials, senior administrators, managers, business executives, Your Excellencies, representatives representing the different diplomatic missions, honorable members of local government and the parliament, honorable ministers and friends, officials who are the custodians of trust. Welcome back to the preliminary plenary session of the WINGS conference. We will set the stage and define the boundaries of the WINGS conference. That is my brief during these sessions. At the outset, I must say how privileged I am to be the moderator of this session and to introduce and provide a broad overview of the conference format. The organizing team has worked tirelessly to design a conference that is truly a celebration. We had a visual glimpse earlier on, an innovation in putting together an array of learning and experience sharing activities. Congratulations to all of you for a job well done. ONUR, the National Arts Council, CARE Sri Lanka, GIS supported by EU. You deserve a warm applause. Please join me. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. So the question is, what's this all about? Arts and culture play a profound role in our daily lives in ways we can scarcely imagine. WINGS is a unique festival and conference where arts and culture are given an influential voice on a platform shared with artists, performers, policymakers, students, journalists, thinkers, academics, entrepreneurs, and citizens. The voices you hear and the performance that you see will be pioneering and contemporary, while deliberating and demonstrating a range of issues related to coexistence and reconciliation. The festival and conference will include live performances, exhibitions, workshops, paper presentations, and panel discussions. You may ask the question, why at this point? In the aftermath of violent conflict, investing in artists and culture renewal is not likely to be at the top of the agenda of negotiators or administrators who plan for reconstruction. In addressing painful historical legacies, dialogue, trials, and tribunals are likely to claim far more resources than theater, poetry, or exchange programs for artists. And all of us from the academia, we know that when there's budget cuts, the first department that gets the X is the Department of Art and Culture. However, governments around the world, Sri Lanka included, are increasingly realizing the need to adapt multiple approaches to addressing reconciliation that complement classical track one political dialogue. On the other hand, at the end of the spectrum, civil society groups have boldly resorted to arts to express themselves and have positioned creative expression as fundamental to the articulation of loss, grief, and hope for peace. Experiences from around the world also indicate the post-war power of art, not just as a tool, but as a social movement towards healing and reconciliation. As Sri Lanka emerges out of its cycle of violence, and new space is found in the changed political environment, there is also a need for Sri Lankan artists to come into contact with those elsewhere around the world. The main goal of the festival and summit is to highlight the influence of arts and the role of arts in reconciliation and national dialogue in Sri Lanka by inviting academic researchers and best practices from around the world, as well as those within the country, to be showcased and disseminated. It will provide artists and other stakeholders from all over the world an opportunity to network and share lessons learned. An additional goal is to provide a platform for dialogue for artists and professionals with cross-disciplinary interests and related issues. The festival will also showcase outputs of 2 EU-supported projects in GIZ and CARE. As the projects wrap up, the festival will be the premier dissemination event to communicate the outcomes and impacts of the projects. The themes of the conference and the festival are art of witness, basically dealing with historical trauma and memory, art of connecting, new media, youth and democracy, art of dissent, art as a negotiation of civic space. If I may elaborate a little bit for you to understand these words, art of witness or dealing with historical trauma and memories, dealing with the legacy of violence is one of the greatest challenges facing societies in the aftermath of armed struggles and protracted conflict. Research suggests there is a relationship between the ability to address this legacy in a comprehensive and inclusive manner and the potential to develop sustainable peace. Art of connecting, on the other hand, focusing on new media, youth and democracy. The voice of youth as change agents and advocates of peace is increasingly being recognized all over the world. Youth has the potential to spearhead creative change, harness technological opportunities of the future. However, can we empower youth to play a more critical and leadership role in fostering democracy? That's a question for us. Art of dissent. Art as negotiation of civil space. Arts is a powerful way of celebrating diversity. We are aware that it brings people together on matters of social and personal significance and creates space for dialogue. It can build on dissonance and transform it to resonance. But can it also articulate dissent in a way that will be taken seriously and peacefully? I would like to draw your attention to the conference brochure, the little booklet that you got. And in that, the whole program is there. It has been color-coded to the 3 themes that I just mentioned. So please follow the booklet. Those of us who plan to be here today, tomorrow, and day after, there's a lot of sessions going on parallel and side events. Please look around and identify those that you would like to stay engaged with. And it is a multilingual event. There will be translations available. You can meet all of the resource persons and key persons who are listed with the photographs, so you can identify them and talk to them. I've been telling this to all the young people around, that take it as an opportunity to make connections with not only people from here, but all the different continents of the world. So it's an excellent opportunity. Can we now see this video clip on the 3 themes? That will be helpful for us to understand.
ඇත්තටම අදහස වුණේ සංගීතය තුලින් කොහොමද මඩකලපුවේ සිටින යෝන් පිරිසක් කියන්නේ ආටිස්ටික් පිරිසක් එක්ක අපි කොහොමද කනෙක්ට් වෙන්නේ කියන එක තමයි ප්‍රධාන පරමාර්ථය තිබ්බේ. ශ්‍රී ලාංකික සංගීතය කියලා ගත්තොත් අපි උඩරට පහතරට සබරගමු කියන්නේ සිංහල සංගීතය ඇරෙන්න මේ මඩකලපු ප්‍රදේශයේ තියෙන මඩකලපුවට ආවේනික වූ සංගීතයක් ගැන කොහෙවත් ප්‍රචලිත වෙලා නැහැ. ඉතින් ඒක ගැන අපිට හොයලා බලන්න තමයි ඒක මූලික අරමුණක් වුණා.
රට සිරිතට දිවදික් කරනා අද සිංහල කළු සූදා
I had this idea of doing a film on the music of the minorities for a long time. I came into it not knowing too much, but when I started working with the musician Anthony Surendra for my own films as music director, a vast field opened up for me. I kind of got to know suddenly that in the music film industry, the musicians of minority origin, Raksami, Muthuswami, Mohideen Beg, and all were very crucial, fundamental, and I was fascinated by this. Then Artlink came along, and then they had, and I thought this was the moment. So Artlink, I think, was looking at something very fundamental and broad, not just some kind of reconciliation package.
මිනිස්සු යහපත් විදිහටත් වෙනස් කරන්න පුළුවන් අයහපත් විදිහටත් වෙනස් කරන්න පුළුවන්. අපේ සිහිනය තමයි යහපත් විදිහට වෙනස් වෙන මිනිස්සුන්ගේ ලෝකයක් නිර්මාණය කිරීම. ඉතින් මෙතෙන්දී අපේ ඉලක්කය බවට පත් වුණේ මේ ව්‍යාපෘතිය තුල පාසල් 4ක දරුදරියන්. ඉතින් අපේ විශ්වාසය තමයි මේ දරුවන් මේ ගීත අහන දරුවන් 100%ක් නොවෙන්නට පුළුවන්. නමුත් එක්තරා පිරිසක් යහපත තේරුම් ගන්නවා. ඔවුන් අනිකුන්ට කියන්නට උත්සාහ කරනවා. එහි සුන්දර අත්දැකීම් තුළ අප ඒ ගමන ඉදිරියට ගමන් කරනවා.
මේ රටේ ජීවත් වන විවිධ ජාතීන් ආගම් රැසක් සිටිනවා. ඉතින් යුද්ධෙන් පස්සේ සිත් බිඳ වැටීම් කලකිරීම අප අතර සිදුවන්නට වුණා. ඉතින් ඒ හැම දිනකම සිත් සුවපත් කරමින් සංස්කෘතික විවිධත්වය නර්තනයෙන් කොහොමද ඉස්මතු කරලා සමාජගත කරලා මේ අයගේ සිත් සනසන්නට අපේ කලාව තුළින් හැකි වෙනවා නම් ඒ තමයි අපේ දේදුන්නේ සාර්ථකත්වය. දේදුන්න සංස්කෘතික නර්තන ප්‍රසංගයේ මම හඳුනාගත්තේ ලාංකිකයන්ගේ හද ගැස්ම කියලා. ඉතින් මේ හදගැස්ම ප්‍රතිනාව ලංගන්නට දේදුන්නේ වර්ණ මේ රටේ හැම නගරයකටම අරගෙන යන්නටයි මගේ උත්සාහය.
මේ ව්‍යාපෘතිය නම The Red Milk. මේක කතා කරන්නේ මීට අවුරුදු කීපයකට කලින් මැද පෙරදිග රැකියාව සඳහා ගිහිල්ලා ගෙලසින්ද ඝාතනය කරපු රෙසානා ගැන. එතකොට මේ වගේ ව්‍යාපෘතියකට ශ්‍රී ලංකාවේ ප්‍රේක්ෂකාගාරය ගැන හිතන අර්ථපතියෙක් මුණ ගැහිීමට තියෙන ඇති සම්භාවිතාවය ඉතාම අඩුයි. මේ වගේ පරිසරයකදී තමයි මට ආර්ට්ලින්ක් ව්‍යාපෘතිය මුණ ගැහෙන්නේ. මේ ව්‍යාපෘතිය නිසා මට පුළුවන් වුණා ජාත්‍යන්තරයට යවන්න පුළුවන් මගේ ව්‍යාපෘතිය ගැන පූර්ව දැනුම් දීමක් කරනවා. මම කරන්න යන්නේ මේකයි කියන එක ගැන කතා කරන්න පුළුවන් පූර්ව ප්‍රචාරක පටයක් නිර්මාණය කරන්න. එතකොට මේ පූර්ව ප්‍රචාරක පටය මම ලෝකේ තියෙන ආයතන ගණනාවකට යවුවා. ඒක යටතේ දැන් ප්‍රංශයේ එක් නිෂ්පාදන ආයතනයක් ඒක ප්‍රංශයේ තියෙන ඉතාම ප්‍රබල නිෂ්පාදන ආයතනයක් අපි සමග කිසියම් එකඟතාවයකට එමින් පවතිනවා.
ආසිතිකකට ඉතින් මේ පල්ලා මම මුලින්ම තට්ට ගාලා එළවුවා.
මගේ වැඩපිළිවෙල තමයි කොහොමද රේඩියෝ නාට්‍ය කියන එක විකල්ප මාධ්‍ය හරහා සමාජගත කරන්න කියන ආකාරයට ඇත්ත වශයෙන්ම කිව්වොත් එහෙම විකල්ප මාධ්‍ය කියන එක අපිට හැම වෙලේම පාවිච්චි කරන්න වෙනවා මේ වෙලාවේ සහ ප්‍රධාන ධාරාවේ තියෙන මාධ්‍ය වලින් අපිට විකල්ප කලාවන් කරන්න බැරි නිසා. ඒක අංක 1 වැඩපිළිවෙල තමයි බස් රථ 300ක මේ නාට්‍ය ටික මම බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා වාදනය කරන්න. ඊට පස්සේ අතිරේක අධ්‍යාපන මාධ්‍යයක් විදිහට රේඩියෝ නාට්‍ය කියන එක මේ උසස් අධ්‍යාපන ආයතන වලට මම ලබා දෙන්න බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා.
So
So basically what we wanted to do was we wanted to have people talk about what they felt. So we wanted to get people with different opinions to come together into a room and give their opinions, and then we would use what they said as dialogue, or we would kind of show the same process in a film. What we found was that what came out of that didn't necessarily translate really well into a film format. We worked together and we actually came up with a story that still told the same objectives that we wanted to tell, but had a story of its own.
දෘශ්‍ය කලා අධ්‍යාපනයේ පාසල්වල දශක ගණනාවක ඉඳලා පවතින්නේ එක්තරා එකම සීරුවේ එක මට්ටමක විතරයි. මොකද ඒ නිසා ඒකට උදව් වෙන එහෙම නැත්නම් ඒකට උපකාරී වෙන ඒ අධ්‍යාපනයට උපකාරී වෙන ක්‍රියාමාර්ගයක් ගන්න වැඩපිළිවෙලක් හැටියට නුපුහුණු ගුරුවරුන් සඳහා විකල්ප චිත්‍රකලා අධ්‍යාපන පොත නිෂ්පාදනය වෙනවා. ආර්ට්ලින්ක් වැඩසටහනේ මේ ව්‍යාපෘතියෙන් විශාල මහෝපකාරී තත්ත්වයක් තියෙනවා. මොකද මේකෙදී ඇතිවෙන සියලුම ගැටලු, ඒ කියන්නේ අධ්‍යාපනයේදී දෘශ්‍ය කලා අධ්‍යාපනයේදී ළමයින්ට ඇතිවන ගැටලු निराකරණය කරගන්නේ කොහොමද කියන එක ගැන තමයි අපි සාකච්ඡා කරන්නේ.
கடந்த 30 ஆண்டு கால யுத்தம் இந்த நாட்டிலே பல்வேறு விடயங்களில் சேதங்களை விளைவித்து சென்றிருக்கிறது. யுத்தத்துக்கு பிந்திய 5 வருட காலத்திலே கவனத்தில் கொள்ளப்படாத ஒரு விடயம்தான் தமிழ் முஸ்லிம் உறவு தொடர்பான விடயம். இந்த தமிழ் முஸ்லிம் நல்லுறவை மீள கட்டியெழுப்புவது முக்கியமானது என்று கருதிய விதத்தில் இந்த நம்பிக்கையின் வாக்குமூலம் என்ற திட்டத்தை நாங்கள் உருவாக்கி அதை செயற்படுத்தி வருகிறோம். இதற்கூடாக மக்களை பேசச் செய்ய முடியும், மனதை திறந்து மனப்பகிர்வு செய்ய முடியும் என்ற நம்பிக்கை எங்களிடம் இருந்தது.
நல்லிணக்கத்திற்கான ஒரு உரையாடலை ஏற்படுத்துவதை நோக்கமாக கொண்டு 2009க்கு பின்னர், அதாவது யுத்தத்துக்கு பின்னரான எழுத்துக்கள், முக்கியமாக இலக்கியம் தொடர்பான எழுத்துக்களை ஆய்வுக்குட்படுத்துவதன் மூலம் எந்த அளவிற்கு சுய விமர்சனம் சார்ந்து, அதாவது யுத்தத்துக்கு பின்னர் தன்னுடைய பிரச்சனைகளை தானே திரும்பி பார்க்கின்ற ஒரு நிலையில் தமிழ் சமூகம் இருக்கிறது என்பதை ஆய்வுக்குட்படுத்தி அதனை ஒரு நூலாக வெளிக்கொணர்வதுதான் இந்த திட்டத்தினுடைய முக்கியமான நோக்கம். 2009ற்கு பின்னர் வெளிவந்த, முக்கியமாக அந்த யுத்தச் சூழலுக்குள் இருந்து அந்த அனுபவங்களை பதிவு செய்திருக்கின்ற எழுத்தாளர்களுடைய 20 நூல்களை இந்த ஆய்வுக்காக நான் எடுத்திருந்தேன். குறிப்பாக இதில் சில முன்னாள் விடுதலை புலி உறுப்பினர்களும் இருக்கிறார்கள். அவர்களுடைய எழுத்து நாவல்கள், சிறுகதைகளும் இந்த ஆய்வுக்கு எடுத்துக்கொள்ளப்பட்டிருக்கின்றது. எந்த அளவிற்கு அவர்கள் தங்களை திரும்பி பார்த்திருக்கிறார்கள், எந்த அளவிற்கு சமூகம் தன்னை திரும்பி பார்க்க தயாராக இருக்கின்றது என்பதை இந்த ஆய்வுகளுக்கூடாக நாங்கள் என்னுடைய நூலில் இந்த விடயங்களை நான் தொகுத்திருக்கிறேன்.
යම්කිසි ආකාරයක ගවේෂණයක් කරන්න කලාව හරහා කොයි ආකාරයේ සංවාදයක් සමාජයේ ඇති කරන්න පුළුවන්ද කියන එක. ඒක ඡායාරූපකරණය තමයි අපි ඒකට මෙවලම විදිහට භාවිතා කරන්නේ. අනිත් ප්‍රධාන අරමුණ තමයි තරුණ තරුණියන්ට යම්කිසි ආකාරයක සුරක්ෂිත පරාසයක් නිර්මාණය කරලා දෙන්න, ඔවුන් සමාජයේ කියවන ආකාරය සමාජයේ එළියට කතිකාවතකට අරගන්න. මේක ඇතුළට අපි ගොනු කරගන්නවා කොහොමද විවිධ ජනවර්ගවල තරුණ තරුණියනුත් ඒ තුරට ගෙනල්ලා ඔවුන් අතරත් සංවාදයක් ඇති කිරීම හරහා ඒ ජනවර්ග සම්බන්ධව සහකම්පිත සමාජයක් ඇති කරන්න මොන වගේ දායකත්වයක් ඒ තරුණ තරුණියන්ට කරන්න පුළුවන්ද කියන එක සොයා බලන එක.
Thank you for that visual which introduces the 3 themes. We now go to the panel discussion. I'd like to invite Dr. Gabriel Wilsberg from Germany, Professor Sitralega Monaguru, Dr. Harshana Ramukwella, Dr. Malathi Dialvis and also Kunda Dixit to join us. Discussion, and then they will have a small role to play, small but an important role to play. We explain the production of the journal. Sorry. So at the end of the panel discussion, they will explain to us the editorial process that some of the outputs will go through and production of the journal. Okay, it is indeed a privilege to sit with an eminent panel of experts here. Occasionally one gets the privilege of sitting with great people, being in the right place at the right time. Okay, on my left is Dr. Harshana Rambukwella. Oh, I'm doing it wrong, no? I should be sensitive to gender justice here. On my left, close left is Professor Sitralega Mohanaguru. I teach gender and I'm very sensitive to this issue. Okay. Sitralega Mauragi is a retired professor whose career spanned over 30 years at the University of Jaffna and the Eastern University. She's one of the few who forged academic work and social activism in their careers. She was engaged with the Mothers Front, Women's Studies Circle, and Purani Women's Center in Jaffna in the 80s and early 90s. Her work continues with Surya Women's Development Center in Batticaloa. She was honored by UNHCR in 2003 for her efforts to support internally displaced women and gender equality in Sri Lanka. Sitralega compiled and edited the first collection of women's poetry in Tamil in 1986, titled as Solante Setikal, Messages Unspoken. Sitralega's research interests are in gender, Tamil literature, and folklore. Dr. Malathi Dialvis is a socio-cultural anthropologist and a visiting professor at the University of Colombo. She has published widely on nationalism, humanitarianism, social movements, suffering, displacement, disappearances, and memorialization. She will also be presenting a paper titled The Life and Death of a Memorial. Gabriela Ulsberg, thank you for joining us in Sri Lanka all the way from Germany. She's PhD in History of Art, is the director of LVR Landers Museum in Bonn. The State Museum in Rheinhard, Germany. The LVR Landers Museum in Bonn is a union with Max Ernst Museum, Brunn, and Museum of Zulpich, which its antique Roman architecture. Ms. Ulsberg is a member of several advisory boards and holds curatorships such as the Ludwig Museum in Budapest, Hungary, and the Society for Numismatics, I hope I got it right, in Bonn. She has served as a member of the Board of Trustees in Friedrich Wilhelm University, Bonn, and has for the past 6 years been a member of the steering committee of the German Union of Museums. She is currently the chairwoman of the Citizens Foundation of the Prosecuted Arts in Solingen, Germany. We have Dr. Harshana Rambukwella, is director of the Postgraduate Institute of English at the Open University of Sri Lanka. He received his PhD from the University of Hong Kong, where he is honorary assistant professor at the School of English. He is an alumnus of the School of Criticism and Theory, Cornell University, and has been an IASH Fellow of the University of Edinburgh. Harshana's research interests are in post-colonial literature and the intersections between literary history and nationalist discourse in Sri Lanka. His work has appeared in journals such as the Journal of Commonwealth Literature, Journal of Asian Studies, and Boundary. Dr. Dev Pathak, he teaches sociology. He told me just to introduce him as a sociologist. However, I will extend the introduction a little bit further than that, and was a Charles Wallace Fellow at Queen's University, Belfast, UK. He has a doctorate in sociology from Jawaharlal Nehru University, and his research interest consists of broadly of cultural performance, art, music, and popular cinema in the region of South Asia. He has contributed articles to the journals such as International Critical Thought, Journal of South Asian Studies, Contemporary Sociology, Gandhi Mark, the Book Review, Sociological Bulletin, and the list goes on, although he said he should be introduced just as a sociologist. Okay, Mr. Konda District has already been introduced, we'll listen to you, but then we'll go straight to the panel discussion. I'd like to open the panel discussion, but I'll follow is I'll ask a few questions from the panelists. They will respond and we'll go around. Hopefully there'll be time for the panelists to have another question. We will not have a Q&A with the audience because it's just a flavor of the three themes associated with people who are sitting here, and they will explain their experience in working in these thematic areas. And the rest of the 3 days, we will have different sessions where you can meet them as well as other people, experts in these areas of work. So, without further ado, let me continue. With a small preamble. Our generation must go down in history as the generations that tried hard and sincerely to make the world better, devoid of war, and spared future generations of its misery. Much has been tried, tested, lessons learned. We are here to reflect, learn, identify those that could inspire us to do better. When hopes fade and despair sets in, it is essential to look over the fence, listen, and be inspired by the works of others. Ladies and gentlemen, the FLICT project of the GIZ since 2005 has undertaken work on capacity building, on conflict transformation, social integration, reconciliation, and peace building. A journey of 1.5 decades. Harshana, you have reviewed the work done by FLICT GIZ project in this area, in this thematic area, art of connection. Art as a means of making connections across various social divides. Could you start with the lessons learned based on the work FLICT has done?
Thank you, Vijay. I think, first of all, I'm not really such an expert in this area. I think the real work of this conference you will see through the artist's work and the artist celebration. We are actually, at least I am, much more boring compared to the rich, diverse products that you will see from the artists themselves. Talking about connections, I'd just like to start with that wonderful speech made by Anne Ranasinghe in the opening. It was a gesture of generosity that is perhaps not possible in Sri Lanka at this point, this historical time, because as a minority Jewish person who was prosecuted and driven out of Germany, she ended her speech by acknowledging her debt to German literature. So that which, a culture which rejected, but in a way her whole artistic makeup was formed. And I don't know whether we as a society are still at a stage where such a gesture can happen. And in that, sort of in that broader sense, if we talk about connection, and specifically the ArtLink project that I reviewed, one of the challenges is what do we mean by connecting? Because there is then an underlying assumption that there is a disconnect if we are trying to connect something. But if you look at the history of Sri Lanka, at least the recent post-colonial history of Sri Lanka, there have been and there are ongoing moments of connection between all of these communities, and of course communities themselves are not homogeneous, which is something very good I recognized in the FLICT project, because a lot of, at least a few of the projects have recognized that there was not just intercommunal but intra-communal divisions as well, and they were trying to address that. But this idea of connecting, I think, is something we have to probe a little bit more critically, because one of the problems with sort of multicultural discourse is that it can lead to this idea of a kind of a rainbow coalition where we sort of celebrate diversity at a surface level without looking at institutionalized, historically entrenched, divisive discourses that are operating in society. And in that sense, I think one of the good things about the ArtLink project as a whole was it gave a space to artistic products which address difficult themes that are potentially controversial. And many sort of, I think, non-governmental organizations, funders would shy away from funding projects like that. But I think in that sense, GIZ Flicked had done something very significant by allowing critical artists a space to explore potentially problematic themes. I mean, I won't go into details. I think you will get an opportunity to see some of these products as the conference out kind of unfolds. And another thing that I think we have to keep in mind, particularly when it comes to funding and sort of planned funding of artistic projects, is what has been called in the developmental literature the projectivization of things. So I think that is not necessarily a very good outcome. But again, in the Flicked the ArtLink program that I reviewed, one of the very positive things about that was that the funding agency did not attempt to sort of impose their frameworks, their structures, their expectations too much on the artists. The artists were allowed a level of freedom, and I think that is very important because ultimately I think the art that will survive, that will have an impact, is art which kind of emerges organically from the artists and the communities. Of course, this word organic is also a very kind of dangerous word because, you know, there's nothing really that is truly organic. Everything is driven by some kind of process. In addition to that, another thing, I mean, that we probably have to think about from the perspective of sort of developmental agencies and funding agencies is this whole division between the artistic product, the end result of the artistic product, and the process through which that product comes into being. In the specific projects that I reviewed, most of the sort of more tangible outcomes in relation to reconciliation or whatever you want to call it had seemed to happen through the process rather than the product itself. Of course, the product has an afterlife. Any artistic product there's no use by date or expiry date on an artistic product. It can continue to have, and it will be picked up in different ways by society, discussed, debated, etc. So, I mean, I don't want to dismiss that aspect, but when you look at the, particularly in Sri Lanka's context right now, I think the process is very important. How do you bring people together and get them to talk about potentially difficult issues? Then sort of one last thing that I'd like to speak about is the challenge of mainstream art and culture, because it is ultimately sort of, if you're looking at reconciliation and art, mainstream culture presents a massive challenge, because it is in mainstream culture and art that a lot of the stereotypical attitudes, whether divisive or whatever, tend to be reproduced. And many of progressive sort of artistic productions circulate within a limited ambit. So in some ways we end up preaching to the converted. And how do we get this out? And how do we, in a sense, mainstream critical progressive art is a challenge that I think we need to address. And there are a couple of other points, but in the interest of time, I'll stop here.
Thank you, Harshana. So your engagement with Flicked highlights some very important issues of the need to be bold, the need to also address these issues of mainstreaming, and also the freedom that artists really must have to pursue their art and also for social change. Thank you very much, Harshana. Let's move on. Gabriel. Germany has inspired the world by having the largest number of Nobel Prize laureates, but also has had a very traumatic and difficult history. But you seem to have dealt with the past quite well. and have a very robust democracy and peaceful country to which thousands of migrants and refugees flock to. You also have a legacy of having various mechanisms to deal with your troubled past. How has your work on using museums to deal with the past helped? What lessons could you share with us?
Yes, what lesson I could share. The first lesson we can share is that it is a progress and it's not closed up. And it will never be closed up. In the morning we hear a voice from the past who tells us what it happens in Germany. And this is not a kind of conflict, it is a guilt. It is a heritage of our cultural past. And we tried in Germany to remember these past every day and forever. This is one part we made surely with museums, with monuments, with institutions, with different pieces to work with heritage of memory in cause that never happen such things again in the future. But when I would say what was for Sri Lanka is important, the friendship between the partners, the refusing of the conflict, the operating with the humans, this is another kind. And we learned in Germany as well that the heritage of the memory is one, but the processes to work and connect people together, to work today with Jewish people, but also with our neighbors, with the Polish people, with the Russian people, with the people from the Netherlands or France, people we have occupied in the Second World War. We had to find a new kind of friendship. And for this, there's a lot of projects we have realized in the last years, and I think they show that art perhaps is the best communication factor for the first steps to come to a discussion between the people and to start new friendships. So in this case, we realized that some artistic projects, German artists and Polish artists, as an example, I will show it later on, they worked together on the anniversary of 70 years attack from Germany to Poland. The Polish artists look at these theme and made artworks, the German artists make it, and they make together an exhibition who was shown on several places, also in Germany as well as in Poland. And was, for me, was the best result, not the visitors of the exhibitions all over the places, but the collaboration between the artists in the future. In the last 5 years, they made together 4 exhibitions with other teams, with other future ideas. They cooperate on the artistic and creative level they found together in reflection our common past. And this, I think, is a new kind of cooperation, communication, and friendship. And this, I hope, we will able to be on work furthermore in Germany.
Thank you, Gabriel. This is, so I think the lesson for us, as I hear you say, is that you have huge challenges, very big. I think you may think of the Sri Lankan problem as something much less in terms of challenge. Thank you very much. So your experience of working with artists across the different national boundaries is something that we could perhaps learn from. So moving on, Sitra, you worked in the East, attached to the university, and also with many civil society organizations. How did you and your partners find space to carry out your work, stay afloat, deal with the war, caught between 2 very powerful militarized groups? How did you use art, help to build bridges, deal with forces that in most times seem overpowering and intimidating? Please share some of your experiences. I know it's a very big question. Highlights.
Yes. I've been working in the North and East. I actually started with Jaffna University in the late 70s and then continued with Eastern University. You said 2 militarized groups, Vijay, but it's many. It's diverse militarization I experience throughout my work and life. Now, the teaching at the university gave me an opportunity to interact with youngsters all the time, women and men. In the beginning, it was in Jaffna, it was various community students, Sinhalese, Muslims, Tamils, various, from various ethnicities. And later it became mono-ethnic, monolingual. That's a different story. Likewise, the Eastern University also, there were displacement in the 90s and the Sinhala students have to leave. But I'm happy that now things are a little better, not fully at all. There are still conflicts in the universities, recent incidents. I work with especially women's organization also throughout my life. It's there. And art and literature helped us to keep us sane, not going into madness, because it was chaos. Starting from early 80s, it's chaos, various incidents, including the burning of Jaffna Public Library. I really, it's a horrendous memory still within me. So what I always encouraged, and myself, because I'm a teacher of literature, so I'm by discipline and as personally involved in literature and art, and especially theater and poetry and also sometimes painting. But I am not a creative artist, I am mostly critic. But it gave me a chance to interact and to see how the initiatives, art, literature initiative gave space for people to keep their dissent, because in the poetry or in theater you can couch the dissent. If you are very straight, if you say you are in plain words, then it becomes very dangerous to life. But in theater you can do it in many forms, likewise art, and you can abstract them and interpret different way. So in that sense it become kind of very alternate way of telling, alternate way of thinking as well, I think, and it's very subversive. I consider art and literature as subversive. If we are subversive people, we
Thank
can
you.
use
That
it
sounds
very
very
much.
refreshing.
And the other point I wanted to make, there was talk about memory, and now my thoughts about the Sri Lankan context. People who lived throughout the war, their lived experiences, their everyday life, it's not recorded in official history or official, it's not part of official contemporary history of Sri Lanka. There are, but the art and literature, the poetry, the short stories, or theater, it become witness. It has it's a source for the contemporary history. I would say the folk literature, the songs which are sung by the people who oral poets. Still we have them in the East, and there are various long poems being written and all that. It should be recorded and it should be studied, I would say. However, the other point, the art, literature practices and meeting of various artists help people to build personal relationships. And I consider that very, very important because whatever we say, whatever at the present moment we attempt to bring reconciliation through various means, unless there's a political arrangement or political initiatives, consolidated, it's not going to be materialized soon. So in that sense, the people attempting to form personal bonds and personal friendship and personal relationship are very important, because that will form the basic of whatever, reconciliation. I don't agree with the reconciliation, because reconciliation should be a kind of political thing. It's not a apolitical thing. So the connecting art and literature with that should be based on all this understanding, I would say. Thank you.
Thank you. So you had a point to what Harshana said earlier, that Flick project actually did bring these people together, and you are reflecting at the practical level how it has actually happened. Thank you very much. I like your choice of word of subvertive artists. Let's move on. Malati, in Sri Lanka's long-drawn ethno-political war seems to be over. However, although the overt violence is over, meaning the guns are quiet, the divisive effects remain, and much of the root causes have not yet been dealt with effectively or adequately. Much needs to be done to restore trust, strengthen confidence in social and political institutions. Invisible barriers must be removed. You have worked with various civil society groups, namely the Mothers' Fronts in the North and the South. How did they find the social space to work? Any lessons learned to take the process forward to restore absolute normalcy? I don't know if this is possible. In social relationships amongst communities, people who have been divided by war, divided within and amongst and distanced from the state. Can you share some ideas?
Thank you, Vijay. Just for people in the audience who don't know what the Mothers' Front was, and especially for my friends from South America, it's very similar to the organizations we've had in those countries. It was primarily focused on protesting against disappearances. So you had Mothers' Fronts in the North and the East that was protesting disappearances primarily of Tamil and Muslim youth. And then you had what I differentiate as called the Southern Mothers' Front in the South, which was protesting disappearances of primarily Sinhala youth who were involved in a youth uprising. So we've kind of had the civil war and then also a youth uprising. But what brought all these mothers together was the kinds of disappearances were very similar. In a sense, I think the military learned, fine-tuned their processes in the North and the East and then applied them in the South. So in that sense, you could say that, well, this is a form of violence that could bring, all the mothers together. And my work has primarily been at sort of at an activist level, but also as an academic, trying to kind of problematize these kinds of processes, both the violence and then its consequences in these kinds of political movements. And I've also been particularly interested in trying to understand the emotional and social consequences of this to the families, as well as the kinds of political processes they have used and the forms of protest that they have brought together. And in this context, I think I find it also problematic how women have been pushed to use very particular kinds of identities. So what became really emotional sort of and symbolic was the image of the mother. And I think women used it very effectively. A lot of political parties used it effectively. So for example, the Southern Mothers' Front was very much supported by the Sri Lanka Freedom Party, and actually the former president Chandrika Kumaratunga was very involved. She would appear on their platforms, and she herself was somebody who had suffered just like the women. So I think it made that very important connection, and I think that was very crucial for the SLFP, or the People's Alliance in a sense, of coming to power on this platform of saying, taking on the platform of the women's protests, of the disappearances in the election we had in 1994. But the point I also want to make is that women have many subjectivities. They have many ways of being. But this form of violence produced a presentation of women as a very particular identity, which was mothers. There were many, other forms of womanhood also that was affected there. And in this context, I think I want to link up with what Harshana was saying in terms of the mainstream. I think you were talking about sort of mainstream arts and the mainstream culture, and I would add here the mainstream media, because I think the media is a very important process in enabling and disenabling, I think. And so they produced a very kind of emotive rendering of Sinhala mothers' grief. And I think this is where the divisions come about, because at the same time that there were disappearances in the north and the east, somehow the disappearances in the south were made primary. So it became that there were certain losses and disappearances and deaths that were more grievable than others. And I was studying this from the 1990s, and I'm sad to say that 25 years later, it is the exact same story. So in that context, I apologize, but I have to bring in a very negative note in that I don't think we have progressed in any form in that context, where we still have certain deaths and losses and disappearances that are grievable and others that are not so. And so I think even though women have connected with each other, and I think there were a lot of, and I credit the feminist movement, which was one trajectory that very much worked with different women's groups, and we were doing this throughout the war as well as in the post-war context. I think the media and state processors have continued to see them as divided. And so even today, what women have experienced in the north and the east, they still have no information about that disappeared, and they still are not heard. So I just stop there.
Thank you, Malati. Very painful thoughts to share. So we need to be mindful about the role of the mainstream media, and the fact that death and disappearances is not a grievable monopoly of one group. It's something that is very common to everybody. So it's like a web that we are trying to make connections with. We are running short of time. I get the time signal from our coordinators. I'd like to pose a question to Kunda. We've already listened to you. You are from a beautiful but also a country with a troubled recent past. We listened to you earlier. Nepal seems to be overcoming its trauma, and you also have a bird's eye view of conflicts across the world, not only because you are right at the top of the Himalayas, close to the Himalayas. How should people make connections, find space, and deal with past from your global perspective? Comment.
Yeah, I think for me, the work had to do with journalism. Although I edit a newspaper, the project we worked on the trilogy of 3 books and the exhibition tour that I mentioned in my speech, they were works of journalism. In fact, investigative journalism, to find people and to look at their past and to share their histories. And I don't know whether it's possible to do this in other post-conflict situations. I definitely think that in a post-ethnic conflict or ethno-separatist conflict situation, it might be much more difficult to do a project like this. The reason ours was easier was because it was a class conflict. There is much more of a feeling of us and them, and much more bad blood when it is religious, ethno-separatist or sectarian violence. And how our work started was that we made a call for photographs with two things in mind, two criteria. One was it had to focus on civilians who were caught up in the war. There was enough about the combatants, about the weapons and the warriors. We had to focus on the civilians, and the other was that we really wanted to make a point about it being an anti-war thing, which for some people was problematic because they felt that revolutions are sometimes necessary to combat the structural violence of the state. But we really wanted to make a message about non-violence and anti-war, because wars and violence are counterproductive in the long term. So from 3,000 photographs, we selected about 180 of them and put it in the first book. And it was just supposed to be one book, and that was it. We were going to go home. But I think we were pushed along by the people's need for healing and reconciliation, and the exhibition tour became part of that. Taking the pictures to the people was, in the beginning, we were nervous that we might incite revenge, or it might open old wounds that people wanted to forget. But as the exhibition tour went on, and it lasted 3 years, we saw from the very first two exhibitions that it was providing solace. And former warriors, former enemies standing side by side looking at the photographs. Children who had been through war looking at the photographs, and the complete silence in which they looked at the pictures, for us meant that we were probably on the right track. It also became very interactive because of the comments that came out in the guest books after people looked at the exhibition, which is why the second book came about. We made a collection of some of the more interesting and emotional comments. And then third book was, of course, totally unplanned. As we went on with the exhibition, we would notice people who were familiar. And they turned out to be characters from the first book, from images from the first book. And they had, this was 5 years later, 6 years later. We found out that we had not done their stories justice in the first book with these very short captions, sometimes not even mentioning their names. So we had to, we said, wow, these are fantastic stories. So we went back to about 56 of these characters from the first book, tracked them down, and wrote the third book, which was a bit more uplifting because it showed that after the war ended, they were getting on with their lives. They were, in some cases, fighting for justice. And highlighting that and the coping mechanisms was, I think, a very good lesson for others. So ultimately, we thought we had done something really original until we found out that journalists, photographers in other parts of the world have come up with similar solutions to what we did. And I think the work of Marcello Brodsky in Argentina with his photography museum, Paula Allen, a photography book on Chile after the flowers in the desert, the Rwanda Genocide Museum, the Tuol Sleng in Phnom Penh after the Cambodian genocide. The photographers in Peru have come up with a very similar remembrance, memory work through photography after the Sendero Luminoso War. So I think separately we've come to the same solution, which is how do you use images, photography, ultimately, and make it interactive and take it to the people to make it, to make these images a part of the healing and reconciliation process. But I agree with the other speakers beforehand that this work is not enough. It has to be at a political level where reconciliation is pursued as a national strategy not just to prevent future wars, but to integrate countries and bring peoples back together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We are running short of time. I know that summarizing actually does injustice to the subtleties and the finer points in any kind of a story. But to highlight some of the key ideas that came up, we need to be bold to address controversies. If not, we are not going to address the real issues and problems. We have experiences that were shared from Germany, from Nepal, that can build possibilities for Sri Lanka to take this process forward. It's important to create space and opportunities for interaction and networking linkages across the different divides, particularly also amongst the artists, that they work together on common issues. Mainstream media addressing, that's an important issue. We talk about mainstream media, mainstream culture, but I think the effort of generating knowledge, as what Kunda is doing, packing it into books and photographs, stories, is really important. But it has also got to get mainstream in the education system so that it gets into the learning processes of young people who would understand what peace making, peace building and relationship building is all about, and that we don't take it for granted. So knowing that I am not doing justice to all the important and good points that were made, I like to move on to first to thank the panel for sharing their ideas. But as I said earlier, the conference is just starting off. This is the flavor of what is to be, for what is to be expected in the 3 days in these 3 thematic areas. You will have opportunities to interact with the panel members here as well as others who will join us in the other sessions. So the conference will go on and we break up into the different sessions, parallel sessions as well as side events for learning, sharing and also networking. Thank you very much, the panel. Now it's my honest. Please don't run away. So we have an important, there is no formal scientific proceeding that will come out of this conference, but there will be a product that will come up, and I would like to invite Dave to present the idea of what you are having in mind in terms of the editorial process that will go through, and the final product that will come out in terms of knowledge pack for the conference.
So. Thank you, Vijay, for giving this opportunity to share this idea. Precisely in this kind of background where we have these kind of thematic issues which were discussed just now, we anticipated at this journal, which is called Society and Culture in South Asia, there would be few PowerPoint slides which would give you more matter-of-factly kind of information. I will just share some juicy part of it, which is not on the PowerPoint slides. In this kind of background, we expected that the papers which would emerge from the conference would not be one of those very run-of-the-mill, clinically written, disembodied kind of knowledge production. It will be more embodied. It would have its own pulse. It would have its own anxieties, and all these things have been already flagged in this panel. And with this thought, we at the journal, the editorial board realized the necessity of proposing to bring out a special issue emerging from this conference, of course following the due process of peer reviewing and all. So some of these slides as it will go on would give you some information about the background of the journal. It was originally located in Colombo, was edited originally by my colleague Sasank Pereira, who is an anthropologist of the act of remembering and not forgetting. When we started this department at South Asian University, which is now 6-year-old university, this journal was shifted to the Department of Sociology, which is co-published with SAGE. It's a biannual journal, and it has all those unnecessary mathematical frills which everybody likes to know about, those impact factor and all. So that is not juicy part, therefore I will not go there. The juicy part is that what we are expecting in the special issue is that we would subscribe to what we claim to be our objective behind this journal. These days, there are so many run-of-the-mills journals emerging in South Asia, particularly because of the politics of knowledge production going on. All the younger academics have to show some kind of, publication to gain in some kind of, points, and then go through this promotion process, etc., etc. So to distinguish ourselves from that, rat race, we locate this journal within the disciplinary framework of sociology and anthropology. And for some reason in India, unlike in neighboring countries, we do not distinguish sociology and social anthropology. We tend to breathe in both the disciplinary domains quite comfortably, quite easily, which is not the case, as I learned in Sri Lanka. There is good compartmentalization, and that is why sociologists tend to be more mathematical and clinical and data oriented and so forth. We can that's a different field. But even though we are located in particular kind of disciplinary framework, we tend to aspire to bring about some kind of interdisciplinary dialogue through our researches, through our publications. And these dialogues will be precisely what I just now mentioned, would be about embodied knowledge, carrying human anxieties, and it's not to be reduced to social scientists' own mathematical or scientific kind of pretense. And therefore we also invite in great number essays, photo essays, articles, feature articles, conversations, interviews, which would be dealing with some of those materials which are not in the mainstream of social science, and we are not apologetic about not being in the mainstream of social science, right? So it would be dealing with art, artwork, artists' network, all kind of events which are all kind of ideas which are associated with art, such as art reconciliation through art. I mean, this is quite a strange idea, but good to operate with strange ideas. So some of these materials are the background in most of our essays that we publish. We have all those things like editorial advisory board, which gives credence to the journal, and in this background we continue with our plan to have a special issue coming out of this conference. With this, I will just rest my case. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So let us, in our usual way, express our thanks to the panel before we break. You're all invited to lunch outside. What time do we start? 1:30 we start again here. Thank you very much.